Hello folks, Simon here. Welcome back to the channel and another Final Fantasy VII Remake video. Now, the official Final Fantasy YouTube channel has just uploaded the latest episode of the Inside Final Fantasy VII Remake series that they've been putting out over the last few weeks. And this one, episode 3, has to focus on combat and action. I'm going to leave a link to it down in the video description. I'm actually not going to be playing much of it for you today. You can go and check it out. It is an interesting one. Obviously, many of you already know, of course, that the remake is changing combat up a heck of a lot from the original Final Fantasy VII. And this episode particularly just goes into the philosophy behind the combat, why they decided to make such radical changes, and some interesting discussions as well as to what prompted them to include the classic mode into the game, which was really a response to the reaction that fans gave at E3 last year to the combat in Final Fantasy VII Remake. So lots of interesting stuff that I'd encourage you guys to go and watch this video or this episode and check out. But we're not really talking about combat today, because at the end of this particular episode, they actually speak more about the side quest content and how that relates to Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, as a big Final Fantasy fan, I'm a huge advocate of side quest content. I love this stuff, you know, just being able to take a break from the main story, put many extra hours into all of the optional stuff, and then getting the rewards for doing so. Oftentimes, you get the most powerful rewards in a game, don't you, in a Final Fantasy game, by actually doing the side quest content over and above the main story content. And of course, it's optional. You don't need those rewards. You don't need to do that content. You can just stick to the story and then just use the content from the story to go ahead and defeat the final bosses of the story. But for me, and for many of you, I know a lot of us, we just really like to delve into everything that these games have to offer and just get our party, our teams as powerful as they can be from all of these extra rewards. So it's good that they've spoken a little bit about this in this episode. Let's just go over what they say here. So this is about the side quest content in the remake.
今回はちゃんとサブクエストをやるタイミングっていうのはちゃんとストーリー的にも今は一旦こう落ち着いて、街に一回たどり着きました。じゃあちょっとこの夜までの日はちょっと自由行動ですよね。だからいろいろ街を探索してみようよみたいな感じで、ちゃんと必ずストーリーラインを壊さないようにサブクエストなり横道にそれれる機会っていうのを設けてるので、とにかくこう
Okay, so effectively the approach that's being taken here for the Final Fantasy VII Remake is that Square do not want the side quest content to be a complete free-for-all by the sounds of it, in the sense that this is a true open world experience. It isn't. What's happening is that as you progress through the story in the game, you're going to reach certain points where certain bits of side quest content that is perhaps a little bit more relevant to that part of the story is going to unlock and become available, and I guess you can either do that or ignore it and just move on with the story. But if you do decide to do that, then it's not going to detract too much from the story. But what this means is that Square are focusing more on the story side of things than the open world aspects that perhaps some people were expecting, where everything unlocks and you can just go wherever you want, say Witcher style or whatever the case may be. That's not the direction that Square are going in here.
この FF7 のこのミッドガルのストーリーに没入してほしいっていうところが、全てに対してこだわっているっていう感じですね。そのミニゲームもやっぱり今作でやっぱすごくこう気をつけているのってやっぱストーリーライン、ストーリーだと思ってるんですね。なのでこうバトルにしてもミニゲームにしても Yeah,
it's great to see some of these silly mini games coming into Final Fantasy VII Remake. The original game had their fair share of them. I don't mean silly as in darts is a silly thing to do, but in terms of the context of the game, some might think that doesn't really fit here in the context of everything that's going on in Midgar and stuff. But of course, you know, this is the Final Fantasy, the heart of Final Fantasy VII, really, because that kind of stuff existed in the original game, and I'm very pleased to see that it's coming back here as well. Even though darts weren't in the Final Fantasy VII original, that type of philosophy of those sorts of mini games certainly was.
ミニゲームやらされてもやっぱりこうお話が途切れてしまうので、やっぱどのミニゲームもストーリーラインに合わせてちゃんとこのストーリーのここにこういうミニゲーム
Incidentally, I don't necessarily expect that darts or squats or whatever the case may be is necessarily going to lead to the greatest rewards in Final Fantasy VII Remake. There will be side quest content, no doubt, that does. I'm suspecting this is mostly going to be for fun, but there might be trophies and stuff tied to it, so we'll see what happens.
やっぱりこうユーザーもそれに対して納得性があるよねっていうところをちゃんと設計して こう作ってるので、そこがこだわりですかね。
Yeah, that fella Andrea, he's part of the Honeybee Inn or Honeybee Mansion, whatever it's called, now in the remake. So he's obviously quite a well-known figure in Wall Market. I suspect that this means that there's actually some kind of tournament tied to this particular mini game here of the pull-ups, and you know, maybe as you progress through it, you can start to battle some of these more famous residents of Wall Market here. I'm just guessing on that though, could be wrong.
まあなんか FF7 らしいなっていうところはこうきっと伝わるんじゃないかなっていうふうに思いますね。そうですね、まあ、今回やっぱりお話がすごくメインなゲームなので、ゲームがオープンワールドよりかストーリードリブンなゲームかというと完全ストーリードリブン的なゲームなので、お話進行でどのゲームが進んでいく。
Yeah, and this is just reiterating that same point. So side quest content is undoubtedly going to be a big thing in this game, but it's not going to be there at the sacrifice of the story. Okay, so the general philosophy here is you progress through the story first and foremost, and as you do so, certain aspects of the side quest content will become available to the player, which they can then choose to undertake or not. But it won't be, as I say, a complete free-for-all where everything's available. You can choose to do whatever side quest you want to do, or choose to do the story, as we've seen in open world games. That's not the philosophy here that's been undertaken. This is really a complementarian philosophy of side quest and story content, rather than you choose between one or the other.
感じのゲームになってます。ただただお話をこうずっとこう見せられていくと、やっぱりこう自由度がないので、要所要所にそのサブクエストとかそのまあミニゲームがメインで必須ではないミニゲームだったりっていうものがこうあって、それによってまあそれは必須プレイではないんですけど、まあそこでちょっとこう他の道にそれて遊んでもらう人は遊んでもらって、やっぱり本編をやりたいなっていう人は本編に進むみたいな、そういうところでの自由度っていうのは意識していますね。そうですね。やっぱり原作の FF7 っていうふうにこう思った。
Yeah, one thing I'm really interested in finding out, though I don't expect Square are going to be talking about this, and I hope they don't, this is something we really need to find out for ourselves as we play the game, is how this philosophy is going to translate over to Endgame. Now, they have previously said that for those who are fans of Endgame optional content, such as myself, and I'm sure many of you, then we're not going to be disappointed with the FF7 remake. And I do hope as we start to get to the later chapters that we're going to get a ton of endgame content, including, you know, the massive optional super bosses that require dozens of hours of grinding to get the best equipment to take out. Obviously, they're very different to the story endgame bosses that don't require as much grinding and what have you. Still have that epic feel to them, but the optional endgame bosses are for a completely different subset of players, really, that really like to get absolutely everything they can out of the game. And I hope that the endgame content is absolutely spot on here. Obviously, a lot of the endgame content from the original Final Fantasy VII is not going to be here in terms of the weapons and stuff, because that just wouldn't fit the narrative. And what they're saying is that all of the side quest content really has to fit the narrative. And I don't expect the endgame content to not fit the narrative, but I'm sure they'll work it in that we can still get those, you know, those really tough bosses and stuff. Maybe we'll even be able to access some things of that nature throughout the story. Optional bosses and what have you that aren't actually part of the narrative, but we'll have to see.
時にやっぱりミニゲームっていうふうに思うユーザーって多いと思うんですよ。なのでやっぱそれに応えるべきだと私も思っているので、まあ、今作もやっぱりこう原作に負けないぐらいミニゲームっていうのをこうよしよしに入れて、やっぱりこうユーザーにこうFF7 ってやっぱミニゲーム多いよねっていうふうに思ってもらえるように、まあ、するのがもう原作リスペクトかなというふうに思っておりますね。
Yeah, and that's pretty much the end of the video. Yeah, it's interesting. There's so much side quest content and mini games in the original Final Fantasy VII. I played through it recently on the channel with many of you guys. We did the live streams and stuff. And you just tend to forget just how many side quests and mini games there are in that game. Even just by breathing air into somebody's lungs to try and bring them back to life, and marching with soldiers and doing the squats and just all of this stuff. The game is literally packed full of mini games. You know, some of them are kind of annoying, to be honest with you, and you sort of dread approaching the fact that you're going to have to do them. But the game is full of them, and I hope that Final Fantasy VII Remake follows suit. And from what we've seen so far, it is. So very much looking forward to getting into all of that good stuff. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about the relationship between side quest content and story content that Square are going for here. So story content is the priority, with side quest content complementing the story content, if that makes sense, rather than the other way around, or just having a huge open world where you can just completely neglect story content and do all of the side quest content content. Some games take that route, and it certainly works well, but that's obviously not the direction that Square are going in here. So yeah, please do share your thoughts on that. I know that many of you are already getting your hands on the game by this point, especially those of you in Australia, so please be careful not to share spoilers or post spoilers in my comment section. I will delete comments if I think that they are spoilery. So, you know, I don't want to do that, guys, but just be careful and respect those of us that haven't yet been able to get hold of the game and are just going on official information right now. But I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.